show that we call this meeting to order exactly 1:31 p.m. on February the 20th, 2018. How's everybody doing today?
Chairman doing well.
Good, good, good. We'll start with the call to order and the roll call. Roll call?
Letting you know.
Got it.
You got it?
How you?
Yeah. Mr. Attorney?
Commissioner Merritt,
Here.
Commissioner Villavisi,
Here.
Commissioner Daly,
Here.
Commissioner Dozier, Christian Dozier,
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Nick Maddox.
He's here.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Here. Did you call me? I was in deep conversation there. Any agenda modifications?
No, sir, not today.
No agenda modifications. Consent agenda. Is there a motion for consent?
Consent.
Consent has been moved by Commissioner Daly, seconded by Commissioner Merritt. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We'll move on to items pulled for consent. Any items pulled from consent?
No, sir.
No items pulled from consent. We'll move on now to roll call agenda items. 5A.
And Mr. Burke will give you an overview of the proposed TIP amendments. And
Mr. Burke, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. We are amending the fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 22 TIP, our current transportation improvement program, to reflect 4 new projects. One, additional funding for a bridge over the Attapulgos Creek in Gadsden County, and then 4 pedestrian safety projects in Leon County.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion been made to approve by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Daly. Any discussion on the item? Commissioner Dozier?
I think this question comes up often, and I think it's the same answer, so I'm fine with that. But 2 of these 3 look like they overlap with future blueprint improvements. So in this, is that right, on Adams Street and I'm sorry, it's not the second one, but Adams Street is what really overlaps from Paul Russell to FAMU Way. So are we working in coordination with Blueprint, or we just got to keep moving forward with this project regardless of where Blueprint is?
yes, ma'am. I think with these are these came out of a special pot of money that was set aside in central office specifically for intersection lighting improvements. Greg, I'm correct on that one?
Correct.
And no, ma'am, I think with the timeline with the Blueprint projects, these need to go ahead and move forward now.
Okay, that's just fine. I just always want to ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any more discussion? Motion made.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is just a question that I could have held till the end of the meeting, but since it's on the agenda, do we have a timeline as to when this Attapulgos Creek Bridge on 159 County Road in Gaston County will be started?
Yes, ma'am.
The project is scheduled to let in June. Our CEI inspection engineering contract is actually going to be advertised in March, and then we will let that project in June. They'll have typically 2 to 3 months to mobilize, so it may start anywhere from July to the end of August, and that is your time frame for the bridge.
And my other question, I think this has already been answered before in one of my previous questions to you, Lex. So we are going to have an alternative bridge to that bridge when the new one is being replaced, right? So that road is not going to be closed.
I cannot answer that question without talking to that project manager in terms of the maintenance of traffic. But I can get you the information and the maintenance of traffic information and send that to you.
Would you please, because that's one of the concerns that the citizens are expressing as to whether they will have to get an entire detour on 159 going back towards Havana if they are living on one side of Jemison, and then if they have to go the other way, if they are living the other way. But if there's going to be an alternative bridge to that bridge when that particular bridge is being replaced, I will be very glad. I'll be happy to get that information so I can pass it on to them. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any more discussion? Motion on the floor made by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Daly. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor of the motion on the floor?
Roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call vote. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Merritt,
Yes.
Commissioner Villavisi,
Yes.
Commissioner Daly,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Commissioner Nick Maddox.
Yes.
Unanimously passes.
Thank you. We'll move on now to 6, CRTPA action. 6A, CRTPA board weighted voting. Mr. Executive Director.
Yes, sir. At the last month's meeting, we brought up some information related to House Bill 575 that was going through the state legislature on the House side regarding voting membership requirements as well as board composition. At this point, it does not appear that the bill is moving forward. Its last committee action, I believe, was on February 10th. It has not been heard in the Senate side. If I recall directly, I think the end of this week marks the end of the committee meeting. So at this point, it does not look as though the bill is going to go forward. At the meeting last month, you all requested staff to bring back some information related to the history of the weighted voting with the CRTPA and any ramifications if you were to eliminate that. We went through and provided a fairly detailed history in your agenda packet. The weighted voting originally appeared in the early 2000s when I believe the school board was added as a voting member. In terms of impact to the board, of course, you would look to be going to a single member, single vote. I will tell you from an administrative standpoint, that's much easier. We don't have to sit and calculate points, but ultimately it's up to the board itself as to what you all may want to do with it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and let it go from there.
All right, discussion. Suzanne, I'm pretty sure you didn't want to speak on this, huh? Your card's up.
Sorry.
All right, Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated the analysis. Did not know all of the different evolutions on voting, so I don't have any other comments other than to move to approve the item. I appreciate Commissioner Mayor bringing this up, and I think it works for us.
Just a point of order.
No, go ahead. You're good. I was about
I talked to the executive director. There is a pending piece of legislation, and what we were recommending is that you approve it and direct staff to wait until the legislative session is concluded. So if for some reason the legislation passes, we could craft the amendment in light of the legislation.
But if it doesn't pass, still move forward.
Still move forward, correct?
I'm sorry, thank you. My motion was, I should have been more specific for options 1 and 2. Then it's directing us to move forward, but also seeing where the legislation comes out, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say you changed your second?
I changed, yeah.
So you are seconding, no?
I am, yes.
Okay, second.
He
Okay.
seconds
I'm
the
modifying my
amended,
second.
yes.
Okay, all right. Motion been made and seconded by, motion made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Merritt. Any more discussion on the item? One quick question. So how does that affect quorum? Like today, we wouldn't have had quorum?
we have 6, you'd need 6 members for a quorum.
6 members for a quorum, okay.
And I apologize, I just realized something. I talked to Roseanne Wood earlier, and she had inquired about the possibility of removing the school board as a voting member and making them an advisory member. And I apologize, I completely forgot to bring that up, so I don't know if we want to.
Want to modify your motion to move forward with that, too?
Wait, before we do that, was that her or was that the school board?
That was her in particular. She was going to be here today, but she's helping coordinate the March with School Kids. So that may be something if we want to wait until next month to address. And again, I apologize. I forgot to mention that part. But she did. She felt that it was probably more appropriate that they become an advisory member as opposed to a voting member.
Commissioner Dozier?
Greg, could we move forward with the 2 options on the table, but add direction for you to have a conversation with the superintendent, with the school board, to see if they would like to agree to that change, and then all of these 3 pieces are moving at the same time, but we're not holding up our process, correct?
That'd be fine.
Okay, so amend the motion a 3rd time?
Yep.
All right, we're good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Merritt, with all the things involved. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
I'm sorry, before you vote, I'm not clear on something. I know we're going to go to 1 person, 1 vote.
Yes.
Are we going to 3 and 3?
3 and 3.
3 city commissioners, 3 county commissioners? Okay, that just need to be clear about that. Thank you.
Which is,
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm confused.
it's what we currently
Yeah, it would be the existing structure as it is now with, and then also too, as we mentioned in the cover memo, Leon County and the city of Tallahassee would lose their ability to change the number of members. It would just be set at 3 members.
All right.
And we're going to have fresh meat on my, we'll have some fresh victims on my commission as in November who will round out the number, I hope.
Victims is going to make people want to run for office there. Thank you.
And Gadsden County will have 2 votes, right? County and cities?
Yes, sir.
And Wakulla has 1, Jefferson County has 1?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries without objection. We'll move on to 6B, Midtown Area Transportation Plan. Mr. Executive Director.
Greg, we're going to take the introduction. Do you want me to on this one?
Good afternoon, members again. As you may recall, the Midtown Area Transportation Plan was officially kicked off at our June board meeting. The plan, phase 1 of it, which we're actually going to discuss today, is actually a technical analysis of approximately 9 options in the Midtown area. An update, a status update, was provided at our October board meeting at the airport. And today what we have Ryan Weatherall from Kimley Horn to provide an update on phase 1 and where we're going from here. Thank you.
Ryan, how you doing, my man?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
Chairman, board members, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to pull up my presentation and then we will forward. So as Greg noted, we provided a briefing at the October workshop, and this is largely the conclusion of phase 1, that technical analysis, the feasibility evaluation of those 9 alternatives that were initially set forth for the Midtown area. So what exactly are we doing here? We're analyzing the traffic trends, the patterns into, through, and out of Midtown. We're identifying network deficiencies in the Midtown area, and we're evaluating potential transportation improvement alternatives. The goal of this phase 1 is to obtain feedback from you all related to these 9 alternatives, and then to move forward with additional study and stakeholder engagement, community engagement of those that we believe to be viable for further study and evaluation. So the study area, the area that we're calling Midtown and that we're looking at, begins on the north at Bradford Road. It comes south along generally Thomasville Road and Monroe Street, south to just north of Tennessee Street in the intersection there. It goes to the west to include Duval and Bruneau, and it comes to the east to include Calhoun and Gadsden as well. This area is rich with businesses, parks, and other residential communities throughout the area, and it has a sense of vibrance, and that's how we established that Midtown area for this study. Before we just jumped right into completing our study, we wanted to review the work that has been done previously and the objectives that have been laid out in the blueprint project with the Midtown placemaking, as well as the work that was done by the planning department several years back with the Midtown Action Plan. In addition to that, recent safety studies by DOT Mike Lewis, the district safety engineer, have been completed. And so we've reviewed those and are continuing to monitor the supplemental safety study, as that is an ongoing project at this time. So as part of this process, we began with data collection. We collected existing available data including signal timings and turning movement volumes from our city staff. Wayne Bryan and his team provided that. In addition, the planning department was gracious and provided us with the GIS information as it related to the sidewalk network that also included crosswalk locations and information related to that throughout the study area. DOT maintains a robust set of data as it relates to the roadway information, and we reviewed that along with the crash data so that we were on the same level playing field as Mike Lewis and his teams, who were focused more on the safety through this Midtown area. We did collect some of our own data, and that was the Bluetooth data that we've talked about previously and we'll talk about again here, that provided us some origin destination information and gave us an understanding of the travel patterns to and through this Midtown area at different times of the day and different days of the week. So as we look at this Bluetooth data, we begin by looking at the AM peak traffic patterns. This is during a weekday, your average weekday. We collected this for 14 days, so we had 10 weekdays during that period that we collected this. We collected it both at the time period where we had FSU and the legislature in town, as well as when the legislature and FSU students left town. So we got an understanding of what might be some changes in the patterns as well. Overall, it was interesting. The patterns were relatively similar in this part of the community, with and without those populations being here. So we start by looking at Monroe Street and the traffic coming into this Midtown area from points north on Monroe Street. And what you see is that largely folks stay on Monroe Street, or they get themselves aligned to the west to come down on Bruneau into the downtown area. As you look at Meridian's a little bit split there. And you can tell by the colors of the area which is the predominant movement. The darker the color, the more predominant the movement. The lighter the color, the lighter the movement, if you will. So as we look at Meridian, again, as you get to 7th Street, you're forced to go west. And so you can see that Monroe Street and Bruneau carry much more of the traffic. Again, coming down Thomasville, you see that more of that traffic stays either to the central part of downtown on Monroe, or moves over to Calhoun and comes down on the east side of downtown. The afternoon is much the same. If you're coming out on Duval on the west side, you're generally staying to the west. If you're coming up on Monroe, you're generally staying on Monroe with some split going up Thomasville Road. And then on the east, you're generally going to Thomasville Road, given the way that the alignments are set up in this area. What's interesting is when you start to look at Midtown as a destination during the weekday, where is that traffic coming from? In the AM, it's generally coming from Monroe Street and Thomasville Road, with still a significant portion coming from downtown. In the midday, it's a significant amount coming from the downtown area. Probably not surprising given the number of folks that go up that way to have lunch and those kind of things during the midday hour on a weekday. In the PM, again, you can see a large percentage coming from the downtown area to that Midtown locations. When you look at the Midtown as an origin, where are people going that have originated in Midtown? Downtown is a predominant location at all times of the day, whether that's AM, midday, or PM, with Monroe Street and Thomasville being somewhat less. So with that, we outlined, as Greg noted, 9 alternatives to begin to study. And we'll step through each of these alternatives, and this is going to be a little bit lengthy, but it's important, we felt, for you all to understand what we were looking at in the evaluation process that we used to look at each of these alternatives in this initial phase. We started with some sidewalk connectivity and realignment. We looked at one-way options and roundabouts, as well as placemaking alternatives and things of that nature. This is an evaluation matrix, and I believe that you all were provided with a completed version of this that we'll get to at the end of the presentation. But this is the tool that we used as we were going through each of these 9 alternatives to evaluate what this meant for the community. In developing this matrix, we gave consideration to Blueprint's placemaking initiatives. We gave consideration to the action plan that the planning department previously completed, and used those as well as the evaluation that we were tasked with completing to develop this matrix. And as we go through each of these alternatives, we complete the matrix and speak to whether it maintains the level of service. Does it accommodate improved connectivity? Does it provide multimodal opportunities and present opportunities for placemaking and traffic calming? In addition, we looked at what it may mean from a right-of-way perspective and then from a potential cost, while providing some notes as it related to our evaluation on the right-hand side of the matrix. So as we go through, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll come to a culmination, the matrix that you all have at the end of the presentation, and we can talk from there. So the first alternative to step through is the Beard Street, North Gadsden Street realignment. The idea here is that we have a roadway that is disjointed, and if you know Gadsden Street, you know that it not only has the horizontal curve that we can see here, but it also has a vertical curve. And you're flaring out to 3 lanes at the same location. So you've got a lot of things going on. And the idea was to improve the connectivity east-west, improve the alignment with Beard Street, as well as take out the connection in that horizontal curve as it related to pedestrian connectivity, and improve the movement not only of people and vehicles but also pedestrians as well. So the concept just initially laid out still remains and allows business connectivity there on the south side, but it realigns and utilizes the existing pavement that's there to line up the connection a little bit further north and to connect that east-west movement across Gadsden. The next alternative that we looked at was the sidewalk connectivity. And I mentioned that we got a robust set of data from the planning department that spoke to all the locations where we had sidewalks in this midtown area. In addition, it provided us an understanding of whether those were on the east side of the road or the west side of the road, the north side or the south side. In addition, it gave us an understanding of where the crosswalks were. And though we're not going to drill down into the crosswalk locations in this discussion today, we will include that in our final report that we prepare as it relates to improved bicycle and pedestrian connectivity and circulation in the midtown area. So one of the things that we did on this initial map was we looked at where the sidewalks existed today. And then in this map, it's a little bit pared down. We took off those locations where the sidewalks were on both sides of the road, and we looked at where we had gaps in the infrastructure, places where we could put sidewalks on the other side of the road to complement what may be there or to connect gaps. And so some of the key gaps that we've noted are Thomasville Road from 7th Avenue up to Colonial on the west side behind Los Robles, and making that connection out of Midtown up to those business areas. 3rd Avenue, 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, and 7th Avenue, those have some gaps on the east-west movements that can be improved. And again, Meridian Road, the challenge of the Canopy Road exists, but the opportunity to connect Midtown up to what's going on at Lake Ella exists, and the potential for creating a sidewalk connection there is present. And then North Gadsden Street, and we'll drill down into that a little bit more in a moment. But one of the things that we've done is we know that the city has initiatives in place, the county has initiatives in place, and we're not going to speak to those things like Glenview that is currently being designed, or some of the design work that the county has going on Gadsden. We'll note that in a minute as well. But the idea was to identify those gaps and try to improve the bicycle and pedestrian circulation in this midtown area. As you can see by the green blocks, there are a number of parks in this area in addition to the residential areas and the businesses. It's a thriving area with recreational opportunities, business opportunities, and residential that we felt like this kind of connection was important to the long-term vitality of the area. So I mentioned the North Gadsden Street corridor improvements, and we'll step through that quickly. These are the locations where gaps exist today. This is generally between 6th and 7th on the left, and then north of 7th up to Thomasville Road on the right graphic there. And we've highlighted those gaps in the sidewalk network. What's interesting is the redevelopment there that includes the Orange Theory and the Brass Tap Shopping Center. They included the sidewalk, as they do with redevelopments, but it left a gap to the north and a gap to the south. And again, providing that connectivity in this area is an important piece. On the right side, you can see again a gap that continues up on that east side, north of 7th towards Thomasville. And one of the things that's interesting is on the east side, the county has a project in place. It's in design right now that would complete that connection on the east side, but the west side still remains, and that connection behind Table 23 and up towards Brass Tap and continuing to 7th would remain. And the idea of incorporating sidewalk connectivity and providing an enhanced network in this location is something that we saw being beneficial. I mentioned the next being placemaking and complete streets as one of the things that we looked at. The important thing as we're talking through these alternatives is to consider the fact that they're not mutually exclusive. Placemaking is the perfect example of that. As we talk about sidewalks and other connectivity, that doesn't mean that we're doing that by excluding placemaking. Placemaking complete streets, as well as some of these others, could be done, and we'll talk about that when we get to the completed matrix, to complement one another and provide a more robust connection and network throughout this midtown area. So here are just 3 examples of complete street projects recently completed within our community. Of course, we're all familiar with Franklin Boulevard, FAMU Way, and Gaines Street. And these are perfect examples of different corridors that have different treatments but speak to the community in which they're serving. Whether it's the on-street parking on FAMU Way or the wider sidewalk along Franklin Boulevard and enhanced lighting. Those are the kind of things that as we begin to move into the next phase of our project and we begin to talk about those alternatives that merit further review, placemaking complete streets is one of those things that seems to make sense to follow along with that evaluation. So the next topic we get into is a one-way evaluation of Thomasville Road southbound through Midtown. And we've got a couple of alternatives here that we'll talk through as we're talking about this topic. The first is a complete one-way from 7th Avenue all the way down to Calhoun and Monroe Street. This pairs well with the Calhoun connection that exists today, and it complements Gadsden to the east, which is wholly one way to the north. The other thing with this alternative is it allows you a movement off of Meridian Street, which we have not had the ability to accommodate, which is a southbound connection onto Thomasville Road. No longer would Meridian southbound be forced to make the right turn onto 7th, but by eliminating the northbound movement on Thomasville Road, we'd have the ability to accommodate through a modification in the signal control and the signal timing, a movement from Meridian directly on to Thomasville Road southbound. In addition, as you can see on the graphics there, south of 7th Avenue and then southbound south of 6th Avenue, there's a 3-lane section through Midtown. It's a relatively tight 3-lane section, but the ability to turn this into a one-way facility gives us the opportunity to recreate and redefine those 3 lanes. 2 lanes of traffic will move what we need to through this Midtown area. The evaluations that we've completed suggest that that would be all that we need. So that frees up additional space for those complete street discussions as we go through Midtown. The next alternative is another one-way comparison in that same area, but it's a little bit different. It takes the one-way option only to 6th Avenue. So basically carries it from 7th down to 6th, and at 6th you would turn all of that northbound traffic right onto 6th Avenue, and then they would have the opportunity to either continue east on 6th Avenue towards the hospital or make the left onto Gadsden. The interesting thing about looking at traffic in Midtown is the fact that most people find their route if the pattern is changed, and we see that and we talk about it. The locals know how to get through this area, and the interesting part about that is I would anticipate that though we evaluated all of the traffic coming to 6th and making the right and then going to Gadsden as those that want to continue north, the likelihood that everyone waits till 6th to move over is not likely the case. Though 6th Avenue, the intersection with Thomasville, would accommodate it if that volume of traffic continued to that point. The additional thing here is that this creates sort of a blockabout, if you will. It uses 7th Avenue and 6th Avenue in combination along with Gadsden and Thomasville in combination to create somewhat of a blockabout in that northern part of this Midtown heart, if you will. The next piece is the roundabout. And so we looked at that, and this is building on what DOT initially began to review. We started with just the traditional modern roundabout at the intersection of 7th Avenue, Thomasville Road, and Meridian Road. And we came to the same conclusion that DOT did a year and a half, 2 years ago, that operationally it just simply can't move the traffic that needs to come through this area. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, what would need to change to allow, from an operational perspective, a roundabout at this location to work? And so then we came up with an alternative that includes no connection from Gadsden to Meridian. If you know this area, we've got dual left turn lanes off of Gadsden onto 7th Avenue and back north onto Meridian, headed northbound. That's a significant movement, and particularly in the PM peak hour. And so by taking that movement out of the roundabout and shifting that movement further north, we're able to make the roundabout operationally work. Now we're showing that coming up to that little slip lane that exists today, but the reality of it is DOT is in the process of looking at removing that slip lane for safety's sake. Their analyses suggest that that is not a safe location for that connection. With that said, we do have 2 connections further north. We have Glenview, which connects over to Meridian. In addition, you also have Bradford that connects over to the west to Meridian as well. So if those folks that wanted to be on Meridian did not get themselves aligned further to the south to end up on that, they do have the potential of remaining on Thomasville Road to make that connection further to the north. So again, this is an opportunity to make this work from an operational perspective. However, With the roundabout, there are a lot of other challenges that exist, and we probably need to acknowledge those before we move too much further. The maintenance of traffic during construction. It is challenging to incorporate a roundabout into an existing roadway network, one that accommodates as much traffic as we have here, both on the east-west movement as well as on the north-south movement. We either have to close down the area completely for the time of construction and divert traffic wholly, or we have to significantly overbuild the area, adding additional asphalt during the time of construction so that we can maintain the signalized intersection while then coming back and cutting the donut, if you will, out of the middle of it and reconstructing the outer curb and inner curb to create the roundabout. Those are two options. We won't do our virus scan right now. We'll put that off to another time. So from a maintenance of traffic perspective, there's that challenge. And in addition to that, pedestrian and bicycle compatibility. We've talked about placemaking and complete streets. Roundabouts inherently aren't against pedestrian connectivity, but certainly when you have the volumes that you have through here, we need to be cognizant of what we do from a design perspective to appropriately accommodate those. In DOT's study, they noted on a 3-day period in the fall of 2015 that there were almost 400 pedestrians through this intersection, and that was a non-game weekend. That's a lot of pedestrian traffic through this area. And so when you couple that with the vehicular traffic, we need to be mindful of those users in this area, and we need to make sure that the concept, if moved forward, speaks to the pedestrian improvements that are needed to accommodate that. With a dual lane roundabout, you have to create additional lines of sight, greater lines of sight, to make sure that that inner lane has enough sight distance so as not to hit somebody in the pedestrian crossing. In addition, with the volume of pedestrians in this area, it may be worth considering pedestrian activated signals to accommodate their safe crossing of the intersection. So there's some of those kind of things that it's important just to be aware of as we look to potentially moving this alternative forward. In addition, the right-of-way and construction costs, the footprint on a roundabout is significantly larger than the existing intersection, and the construction costs will be challenging, not simply because of just the sheer cost of building and that kind of thing, but there's some other challenges out there that we'll talk about in just a moment. And those include the grade change. If you've driven 7th, you know that there's a significant grade change going up as you head to the west. There's 34 feet of change over 1/8 of a mile. It's a pretty significant change. And as you talk about line of sight coming into roundabout, a roundabout that's supposed to keep traffic moving at all times, there's going to not only need to be the work in the vicinity of the roundabout itself, but rework on either side to get those roadways lined up and at the right grade so that they can come into the roundabout safely and have the appropriate line of sight. In addition to that, as you head to the west, you can see all of the utilities in the area and the need to address the utility relocations as well to accommodate the roundabout. So I say all of that to say that we brought it to the point of being able to work operationally, but there's still a lot of challenges that would need to be addressed if the decision is to move this forward.
Would it be appropriate for this board to just nix that option, like we did with the major route through Killearn, and not spend any more money on it if it's not viable?
Mr. Vice Chair?
Or, I mean, are you going to keep proceeding with the roundabout option? It doesn't seem like it's doable.
I think that's part of the discussion today. That's what we were looking for, was direction from the board. I think when Ryan showed you a little further in his presentation, you know, we've discussed eliminating one of the alternatives we've presented. A couple of them are workable, but as Ryan just went over, there are some significant challenges. But ultimately, you know, it's up to the board. But I would say let's let him get through the rest of it and then have that conversation.
So the last option that I want to present real quick is the 6th and 7th Avenue bidirectional roadways. What is old is potentially new again. So we focused on simply this area in Midtown as the 4 signals that control the heart of the traffic in this area, but the reality of it is we're looking at 6th and 7th Avenue all the way from Bruneau on the west over to the hospital in Magnolia on the east. But as you look at that and you change the flow of traffic and you change the operations to potentially create some traffic calming and some additional friction along those roadways to slow traffic down, operationally those 4 intersections break down as they are today. And so without significant improvements at each of those intersections, we can't make this alternative operationally work. So I mentioned the matrix and that we would come back to that. Here's the completed matrix as we went through each of these alternatives. And a check means that it addresses or meets that criteria. An X means that it is negatively impacts or does not meet that criteria. And then a hash mark is that it just doesn't speak to that or has no, it's neutral on that subject. So as we go through that, the matrix, consistent with the matrix that you all have, we've highlighted the top 6 as those that we believe are worth moving forward with at this time. The next 2, which are the roundabouts, we've highlighted in yellow for caution. And if it's decided that we move forward with those, we need to keep in mind those challenges and constraints that we'll need to address as we move forward. And then the last is the 6th and 7th alternative that was just presented. And the recommendation is, given that it doesn't operationally address the needs, that it no longer gets consideration. Again, I go back to the statement made that these are not mutually exclusive alternatives. And you begin to look at these, you can see that you can pick a few of these to create a complete response to each of the evaluation areas across the board there. And so as we look at, the sidewalks and the placemaking and those kind of things coupled with the one-ways, we can begin to create an entire sense of place that not only creates a vibrant area for all users, but also moves traffic through the area. So the next phase is phase 2, and the next steps in the process, and that is to take this out to our stakeholders, refine the evaluation and the alternatives, and to further develop those, particularly as it relates to pedestrian and bicyclists. As a note, we've reviewed these alternatives with Blueprint, with the Planning Department, with the city, with the county, with DOT and Star Metro, as well as the technical and citizen and mobility committees for CRTPA. And they will continue to remain a stakeholder and a partner as we work through the next phase and subsequent phases in the project. In addition, there are subsequent phases. Certainly there are others that have plans in this Midtown area, whether it's the redevelopment of private property or it's the parking project that the city is contemplating releasing in the coming weeks that may result in structured parking in Midtown, or the relocation of the police department. All of those are projects and plans that would need to be considered as we begin to look at phasing and implementation strategies and further refine and develop these alternatives. So with that, I will take a moment. I appreciate you all staying with me as we walked through all of that and try to answer any questions that you may have.
Real quick, well, I got Commissioner Daley, then Commissioner Dozier, then Commissioner Miller in queue to speak. Personally, I like to see the first 4 be considered, but that's just my personal opinion. Don't really see the cost, the point in going for high cost. It doesn't even really quite get to where we're trying to go and causes some pretty big hurdles for us to try to get over. So I would be personally in favor of the first 4 marked green on the Midtown traffic study sheet. Commissioner Daley, then Commissioner Dozier, followed by Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, fantastic job and nice presentation. I compliment you and your team for really jumping in on this issue. And I agree with the chairman. I really like the recommendations. I don't feel quite as strong about the last 2, and actually quite curious to see what other ideas y'all would come up with the traffic flow, with it being one directional as it recommends. But I can go either way. I do agree that the last 3, we could probably go ahead and take off the recommendation. Let me also go ahead and put on your radar, and you have a very unique perspective, because I don't know how many of y'all know Ryan also serves on the Canopy Road Citizen Committee as well. So let me just make sure that I'm on the record of, as we move forward, the key elements to me is obviously, in no particular order, but traffic flow. Also protecting the integrity of these historic neighborhoods, Los Robles, Lafayette Park. The connectivity of the neighborhoods to the business district, and I love what you proposed regarding the parks. We've got this very unique opportunity with these 3 parks to be able to connect them and create this really cool dynamic between them. And I would encourage you to think creatively as we move forward as well, when we talk about with the placemaking, the wider paths and not just sidewalks or bike lanes, but also think creatively, do we have other opportunities through easements that can connect the neighborhoods as well? So it's not just your traditional path next to road connectivity, but other ways to be able to do so. And obviously, the Canopy Road on Meridian Road is very important to me personally in protecting the integrity of the Canopy Road, which is a challenge, I understand. You have literally the structure of the beginning of Los Robles right there. You have a Canopy Road on a 2-lane Meridian Road that carries a ton of traffic, and we're asking you to create connectivity on that. Good luck. I know you can do it. But I just wanted to go on the record. I'm really pleased with what the team has done. I wanted to put my personal priorities out there of what I'm looking for moving forward. I have full faith and confidence y'all will be able to come back with some great recommendations. Mr. Chairman, I'll make your motion for you on the first 4, if you'd like, as a starting point to move forward.
Motion been made to eliminate all but the first 4 alternatives on the Midtown traffic study. Is there a second for that motion? I'll second it for this.
Mr. Chair, point of order, you had some commissioners who had comments before the motion.
Yeah, Mr. Williams, I can make a motion at any time, and we still take the comments, can't we?
You can.
Build upon.
Right.
I just thought he had started a different process, but.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second for discussion. Commissioner Dozier?
Make it amend.
Mr. Chair, I'll happily, if you're okay, defer to Commissioner Miller. She was up first.
Commissioner Miller?
Well, on the immediate sense, I don't want to throw out, I'm not ready to throw out the last of the first 6, those 2 that have to do with the one-way. I want to hear us talk about it more. But anything that reduces the level of service ought to go pretty quick. That's the first column, and when you've got an X and that this does not maintain or improve the level of service, I think that we just need to move on past that. I also want to take a minute to tell you that I'm very happy to see this and very impressed with the work that y'all have done. Ever since we began to look for our next stage of blueprint projects, this I felt was critical and maybe even the most important thing that we needed to address, because this is a problem that is yesterday's should have been fixed. You know, it's that bad. And so thank you for the work that you've done. You've done great work here. Still got a lot to do, as you have probably know more than we do. A couple things about diverting traffic onto Bradford Road. I'm concerned about the northern traffic in the afternoon because, frankly, I think that we could do the southbound one-way on Thomasville and still maintain the connectivity or the sense of place aspect that's there in that area. I think we have road diet in our lexicon here somewhere, and we could have 2 lanes of traffic and bike lanes and sidewalks and fit all that in the space we have. But that leaves me with the answer of, well, okay, when you're going north, we can't put everybody on. Are you saying that we would put everybody on Monroe Street or Gadsden instead of if we take Thomasville out of the mix in the afternoon?
In the Midtown area, I think that you would see folks, and our evaluation of this was that you have Monroe Street, which continues to have a northbound movement. You have Duval on the west that continues to have a northbound movement that'll bring you over and connect into Bradford, going over to Meridian. And then, yes, you would have Gadsden, which would tie into Thomasville and accomplish that same connection as well. So the movement that you would lose is the movement northbound solely through that several block area of Midtown. Because even today, those folks, as they get to the intersection with 7th Street, can't get over to go north on Meridian. It's sort of interesting. So as you're coming north on Thomasville, you're forced to remain on Thomasville. You have no other place to go. And so, yes, we have the traffic. It's similar to the morning. The morning you have Bruneau, you have Calhoun, and you have Monroe Street. So you have those 3. In the afternoon, the idea was you would maintain a complementary 3 headed north.
All right, Bradford Road is a problem in the afternoon all the way sometimes to Centerville, which turns,
Sure.
know, that includes Benton. And so it's kind of scary. I mean, putting more people on Bradford at night seems in the evening. I know you've thought of all these things. I'm just telling you where I have concerns about how people would get around. Now, I generally do math and say, okay, we're taking away 2 lanes and we're adding 2 lanes or however, and this has mostly been in the past regarding how does people get from east to west all over town. And in this case, we're only, even if we did the one-way pair headed south on Thomasville, we would end up only taking 1 northbound lane out, and so I guess we could all accommodate that, probably. That's why I didn't want to run away from that too late, because I think that that one way through Midtown with traffic calming and complete street treatment could really make that area safer, which is really what I'm looking for. It is unsafe, and I'm not sure I feel that if we, in the roundabout discussion, if we take out a light and add traffic, you know, a pedestrian walkway where you have to have a light, like we did on Monroe Street, what have you actually accomplished? And so if you really think this is going to work.
Well, so real quick, back to the one-ways does not have any sort of diversion onto Bradfordville. So if we're talking about the one-way option, it does not add to or detract from a Glenview connection or a Bradford, because again, you did not have that movement onto Meridian as it stands today at 7th. So the alternative that has the impact that I think that you're describing is the second roundabout alternative, the alternative that operationally works there, but has us taking the movement from 7th onto Meridian out and forcing that further north. So I want to make sure that we're not confusing the alternatives there. The roundabout, again, certainly does divert some traffic in order to make it work operationally, and then has all of those challenges geometrically and otherwise to make it work. But from a one-way perspective, I would not anticipate that you would see any sort of diversion onto Glenview or Bradford from what you have today.
And honestly, I bet you that Glenview is really not, between Monroe and Meridian, whoever goes over there. And so that's really an opportunity, I think. I mean, that's not a way that people are using right now. And so I'm hoping that maybe then in the future they will be encouraged. This is good. I'm glad you've taken a really wide scope on this, because it's certainly not something that you can just fix Thomasville Road or fix Gadsden. I mean, you literally have looked at everything from Bruno over to Gadsden, and I think that's really important here. So those are the only comments I had. I mean, the red X's, you've certainly used the right colors on your chart to get everybody's attention. I would like to ask you, when you do the sidewalk analysis, you had mentioned that you didn't take note of projects that are basically underway or moving forward, like Glenview, for example, and it would be helpful if that were indicated as being that we've already taken action to make this happen. Okay. Because that's going to make it easier for us when we look at this and say, you know, what's needed. And then the final thing is a very quickie, that the Lake Ella Drive completion over to Monroe Street has been done. So you can change that to a blue line. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to somebody else.
Anything else? Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we were talking before the meeting, really appreciated the study and all the hard work, so thank you, and good overview, Ryan. I think you covered all the bases. I guess there's one general thought I have here, and that's, it may be in line with something Commissioner Miller just said. We've got a lot of overlapping plans here. So two questions kind of came out in general, and I'm not sure they need to be answered right now, but when this does come back or when we're doing the public outreach, I think it would be helpful to note the other projects that are going on in the area. I wasn't sure if that Midtown Action Plan was a city product or a planning department product or both, but I don't think we have seen that yet, at least for the county or at CRTPA. So it would be helpful to me as a board member to see the action plan, to see some of these overlapping things. But I also think when we reach out to the community and do the second phase, that may be helpful as well. So that was just one suggestion, although I do appreciate you going into Gadsden and, you know, some of those impacts. I guess similar to that, you've highlighted a lot of the existing sidewalks, and I mean, we're not going to replace all of them, but there may be certain sidewalks that the condition is very bad. So whether that is lining with other city work or county work, if we can look at this area more holistically, I know you all are doing that, but I think we're likely not going to widen sidewalks in all places, but there may be some places that it just doesn't work right now because they're very old. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. And I think we'd look more to either the city or the county's programs if they have maintenance programs, because typically, you know, at our level, we're not dealing with sidewalk maintenance or things like that.
Sure.
So, and I want you to keep in mind too, as well as we go through this, I remember both Thomasville and Meridian are state roads, so we would still have to work with DOT. And as Ryan mentioned, you know, we've talked with them, reviewed this with them about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we didn't get a heck no, we didn't get a no. They were actually very open to some of the things that we talked about, because we knew some of these were kind of definitely out of the box in terms of some concepts, but actually had a very good meeting with them and have told them we'd follow back up with them as we progress this project through.
That's great, and I completely agree. I think the general maintenance projects, just so long as we are all on the same page, I know that's your goal, Greg, and it's all of our goals, improving a piece of this and not the rest of it, you know, it's not going to achieve our goal in the long term. So a couple of specific questions here. The Beard Street realignment, when I first looked at that, I wondered if it was going to take more traffic, encourage more traffic into the neighborhood onto Beard Street. In looking at it again,
Doesn't go anywhere.
The alignment's already there, even though you're split there. So you don't see any additional impact to the neighborhood with that realignment. Or if we were going to look at the one-ways, I know that's not part of the motion right now, we are going to be looking at any additional impact into the neighborhood. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Yeah, and I believe the Beard realignment, if there is any additional impact, I think it would be negligible.
As a former resident of Beard Street, it doesn't really go anywhere anyway.
So you actually lived in Leon County before?
Absolutely.
Good to know. All right. Okay, so beyond that, I think coming back to the motion, Commissioner Daley, that's on the table, I was like you. I think the bottom 3 options, I'm really glad we looked at the roundabout, other things in more detail. I mean, that's been in discussion for years. So having the study go this far really justifies why it might not be workable. But the one-ways, those 2 other options, number 5 and 6, I have a lot of concern about the business impacts, the connector streets, things like that. But I wonder if there's a way to tier this when we do the public outreach and say, the board is really focused on these top 4. We think there might be too much impact for the one-ways, but we want to share them with you anyhow, just in case, you know, the businesses say, wow, this really would be a great improvement because it has more of a holistic perspective. I'm not confident that those businesses are going to come back, and the one that only goes to 6th Avenue might be the only option that really was workable. It doesn't impact as many businesses. But what do we think about that option, Ryan?
So one of the things that we were going to say is that, you know, the red X's on the one-ways are opportunities that we see. We were on the fence about putting red X's there, to be honest with you. But the idea is that those could potentially flip. And it's exactly as you said, and Commissioner Miller, as you noted, it provides some opportunity and flexibility for reworking that space. As you go from a 3-lane facility to a 2-lane facility, you may not have the same vehicular connectivity and circulation because you've changed the operations, but you may be able to change and complement with some bicycle or pedestrian connectivity that is a little bit safer and more complete than it is today. And so from that perspective, part of the idea was that if it did move forward, we would talk with those business owners exactly in that fashion of, if this option were considered viable, how would you want to see this street completed, if you will? So.
Okay, well,
that sounds like a really good idea, actually. Mr. Chairman, if you're cool with it, why don't we go with the green, with the motion, and let's hear from the citizens and the business owners and see what kind of feedback they give back. That's a very compelling argument.
Can we look at the tiered approach, though? I kind of like the tiered approach. I mean,
I was
like-
going to
I like your
suggest that
suggestion
as well,
just as
Mr.
is.
Chair, Commissioner Daley, that I think an indication from this board that we still have questions about those two, and we want to hear more, but the first four that we're really confident those need to move forward, that might eliminate the impression that we're going to one-way Thomasville Road tomorrow, something like that.
Sure. Paper tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we get some pretty big pushback on one-way in terms of road, but a tier approach, I think, just to say we're thinking about it.
Please don't suggest a flyover.
Yeah, Mr. Executive.
Just going to say, I wanted to clarify, what we put here in the green was not meant as any type of priority order.
I understand.
But I do think it is good to go out and get some feedback from the public on that. And there's two different thoughts on the impacts, pro and con of a one-way street. And I think we'd at least like to hear from the business owners. And I want to clarify, we're not proposing any of these at this point. These are all alternatives.
Yes.
And I'm always very careful to say these are alternatives, not proposals. I want to get a little bit of clarification on the tiered part. Again, that kind of leads me, when I hear that, towards a priority order, and I would rather just go out with 6 alternatives and just get clean feedback on those alternatives.
I agree, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I guess I wasn't meaning tiered. Good clarification. We use tiered in other contexts to rank things. I just meant clarifying, that, as I said before, that we still have questions about the one-way, and we want feedback on that, as we do with the others, but I think it's pretty clear we want sidewalk improvement.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It was just how we articulate that.
I wanted to make sure, I think the thought would be to go out and put it in that context, with the business owners, these are some things you could potentially do, with a one-way pair. And again, just have a kind of a clean slate, so to speak, and have those conversations. But yeah, clarifying, we're not necessarily promoting one of these over the other.
When you say one-way pair, what's the other pair to Thomasville?
I'm
Like
sorry,
Gadsden?
Gadsden, yeah,
Yes.
one-way, sorry.
So my last two comments, Mr. Chair, thank you for that. Thank you, Commissioner Daley, for amending. With this, I look back, and I'm not sure if these numbers are exact. I looked at one of the early blueprint breakdowns for the Midtown project, and I think there was about $3 million estimated for the 5 Points roundabout. So if that, or for that intersection improvement, again, that was an early agenda item, the sales tax committee, that came out of the sales tax committee. So just working with Blueprint, if we're not doing a roundabout or some substantial intersection improvements there, could we repurpose that money? We still have a traffic issue in this area. Pedestrian activated signals, you mentioned that, Ryan, some other things like that. I mean, I think that there's a conversation we need to have for those of us on the Blueprint board about where these funds come from. Obviously, the projects are always concepts in the beginning anyhow. We work through the details. And the last thing was, and this may be a bit out of the box, I saved it for last, but maybe it would be fun for some of the staff, I don't know. When we do the public outreach, as you noted, 400 people walking across that one intersection in a weekend. I think this is a real opportunity to not just engage the business owners, but to do some tabling out there during a Saturday, on a weekend night, during lunchtime at Manor at Midtown or Waterworks or someplace else, and get people who are using the space as well to give some feedback here. It's not just about the businesses, but it's about those who frequent the business. So I would encourage you all, if you didn't have any objection to that, Greg, to think outside the box with this on how we do that outreach.
Ryan, I will volunteer to assist you at the Brass Tap on a nice Saturday afternoon.
That's what I was about to ask.
Out on the deck. If there's anything I can volunteer to help you out with,
I didn't think this would be that negative.
Well,
I think if anything, we may try one after midnight on a Saturday night, one at 6 o'clock in the evening to see what kind of different results we get. It may be an interesting planning exercise.
It might be.
Actually, in all seriousness, we have done Village Square events at Madison Social over a beer that have been tremendously successful when talking about community involvement. I would not actually put it back. What a great conversation to have over a beverage on a Saturday afternoon on a beautiful day on the deck saying, what does this look like? What should this look like?
I think,
yes,
think
Suzanne,
that is a
we would pay for that with
different
local
approach.
funds, not DOT funds.
How did you know I was thinking use of federal dollars?
no, I mean, I think Commissioner Dozier and Commissioner Day has a great suggestion there. I mean, as crazy as it sounds,
We've had tremendous success.
casual casual conversation about these things or invite more people out.
Yep.
And in those situations, they're actually more apt to give their real opinion about how they feel and feel more comfortable about sharing their opinions. So I'm not saying we have to pay for anything here, but to have the meeting in that place and say, hey, you can buy your own beer if you want to. I don't really necessarily see anything wrong with that.
Have a conversation.
I think it's a great idea. But yeah, so.
Oh, I was just going to say, the other thing that we've talked about is the fact that Midtown for many is a destination. Midtown for many is their home.
Yes.
But Midtown for many is a through route to downtown and their home somewhere else. And so as we've talked about this, we've talked about outreach that, as you guys are pointing out, gets to each of those, to those that are there recreating, those that live there, and those that are just using these roads as a through movement to and from their business or otherwise their home. So we're going to try to do our best to engage all of those populations.
Mr. Chairman, one final comment
Yes, sir.
before a vote. I do, and I'm looking at our good friend at the Tallahassee Democrat here to help us get this message out as well. I do know that one message that should come out of today's vote is that no, we took a look at the roundabout idea, and we are not moving forward. It caused a lot of consternation in the Los Robles area about a year and a half ago, where rumors were rampant that we were tearing down the gates and possibly removing trees on Meridian Road, and that the public needs to know that the staff took a look at it. We said, thank you very much. We're moving in a different direction.
Let's not forget the Wakulla County representative is the one that first brought that up.
Randy, you were amazing.
To nix that idea.
Probably just the opposite.
Mr. Chair, one,
But yeah, I mean, I think that's very important message to come out of today's meeting too, that we've got some great options that we'll continue studying. That is not one of them.
Jeff, you can make sure you put that in the, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank you, Commissioner Daly, and everyone for, I think we've got this in the right posture. We've done the due diligence. We needed to do this study. Thank you all for, the numbers were just incredible and how deep a dive you did on this. But we're getting to some real workable options, and the next step is hearing from the community and the businesses, and I like all three of those groups you mentioned, Ryan, so thank you all.
Motion on the floor made by Commissioner Daly, seconded by myself, that we will move forward with the first 6 options that are in green. All those in favor of the motion on the floor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Executive Director.
Actually, DOT first, DOT report.
I think it's DOT first.
The only update I have is to respond to a request from Dr. Vigabisi regarding the resurfacing of Attapulgos Highway. I have requested that the department consider that request to advance that project. And in our upcoming development of the draft tentative work program, we will evaluate whether or not we have funds that we could do that with in an earlier schedule. 2020 is design, 2022 is construction. So it is in the project and screen notes, and I will be working with Greg as we develop the draft tentative work program to bring that issue up again.
And that will be the Attapulgos Highway?
That is for the Attapulgos Highway, sir, okay. The resurfacing project.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will get you an answer as well to the maintenance of traffic on the bridge.
Appreciate you, Ms. Lex.
You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, pardon me. I've almost forgot one of the most important things to say. I'm very pleased to announce that I have a new liaison working, who has now replaced Darcy Harrell. May I please introduce Donna Green?
Donna.
Been with the department for 22 years in public information, is very familiar with the department, the district, and projects. And we're very fortunate to have her serving the CRTPA region. Thank you.
Ms. Lex, would I be it from FDOT?
Excuse me?
Would that be it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Executive Director?
Yes, sir. Just one thing, I want to give you a brief update as it relates to the Southwest Area Plan. We're moving through and continuing with the stakeholder meetings. We've met with Pineview Elementary, FAMU in the last month or so. Depending on the outcome of the IE meeting on March 1st, we've been discussing the possibility of perhaps reworking the scope a little bit to focus more on Orange Avenue, perhaps South or North Lake Bradford as well. But so we may come back with you next month with some different proposals on the exact scope of the Southwest Area Plan. I just want to give you all an update as to where we're on the plan. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Commissioner Miller?
On the question that you just brought up right there, I was under the impression that we were going to have the Southwest Area Plan, Transportation Plan, to sort of inform our decision.
Well, I think the way it stands now is the IA was going to make a decision by March 1st. And from what we've seen with the amount of information and the recommendations that are coming out of that going to the IA, in cases like South Lake Bradford and Spring Hill Road, I'm not quite sure what more we can do with that in terms of public outreach. There's been a fair amount already. But I think partially I want to wait and see what happens with the IA on the 1st. But if it continues the way that I've seen it in the technical and the citizens committee, I just don't see the need for us to go out and do public involvement related to those particular portions of the Southwest Area Plan.
So who's doing where's the transportation planner in the process?
I mean, that's what Blueprint's been doing with the recommendations they've been developing.
But who is advising Blueprint on transportation plan?
That's coming from the staff. Blueprint staff, sorry.
Anything else? Any questions? Mr. Executive Director, you got anything else for us?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Are there any public speakers?
We didn't get any cards.
Citizen comment? All right, having none, we got correspondence in the agenda packet. Anything from members? Motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to quickly thank Suzanne for the follow-up that she did. The crosswalk on South Adams is completed now.
I saw that.
Yeah, they did a wonderful job, and it was, again, all for the safety of those students crossing that major thoroughfare.
That's activated, I guess, by pedestrians?
Yes. Yeah.
Commissioner Verabisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should have asked this during the FDOT report. On Thomas Parkway, where they're resurfacing and those activities are going on, are there going to be any pedestrian crosswalk on that road, say at Walmart and at Captain D's? Those two intersections that gives problems for people to cross because of the width of those roads. Pedestrian crosswalk being considered at this point in time in this resurfacing of sidewalk and the activities going on right now on Thomas Parkway.
I do not know. I cannot answer that question and give you an accurate answer at this moment. So again, if I may follow up, I know we did look into lighting, and lighting was not a part of the project, and that was the only thing I had inquired about. So I will speak with the project manager and see if that crosswalk is included in that.
Okay. And then with regards to the lighting that you just talked about, my understanding is that the city of Quincy has actually decided to put some lighting on Thomas Parkway. And so if that is the case, which they actually, I was told, was something they approved at one of their last meetings, one of their previous meetings, then the only road then I would be requesting that we consider lighting, which is going to cut down on the cost to FDOT, would be State Road 12. From State Road 12, we really actually do need some light on that road. It's very dark, and some people walk from Havana to Quincy on that road sometimes at night, and it gets real dark. So especially now that we have those shoulder widening on 12, that is where they do their walking from Quincy to Havana, from Havana back to Quincy. So we need some light seriously considered to be put on that particular road. I'm glad that.
So if I may recap, the three things are the maintenance of traffic at the Attapulcus Bridge, whether or not it'll be closed and detoured, or whether the bridge will remain open. Number two, the lighting on Thomas Parkway, the City of Quincy has agreed. However, you'd like to know what other amenities, such as the crosswalk and the sidewalk, will be added. And then third, what we would do for State Road 12 is a cost-benefit analysis on lighting. So it has to meet a certain justification of a benefit for that lighting to be warranted, and I will ask them to do that.
I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else from members?
Push to adjourn.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn, seconded, we are adjourned.
Give me a chance to recap, so I keep my act together.
Dr. V?
Yes, sir.
I talked to Brenda.